Ready when you are.
We'll call to order the joint public hearing for the Select Board and Finance Committee for Tuesday, March 28th. You want to start, Justin?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, first I want to thank everybody at this table, as well as all our staff, town employees, for all the work that goes into forming the warrant. It's a long process. It's taken several months at this point to get where we're at right now. So what we're going to go ahead and do is run through this argument. Argument. I intend for it to be a collaborative process, so if there's anything that pops out as we go through, please feel free to jump out and ask a question. So I'm just going to roll straight through, if that works?
Yeah.
Okay. So the annual town meeting is set for Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 at 7 p.m. at the Howe Manning School Gymnasium. Article 1 is to hear committee reports, it's a customary and usual article. Article 2 is to pay off bills of prior fiscal years. So at this point in time, we have one $90 bill for the Mass Association of Health Boards. Article 3 is the fiscal 24 budget amendment for a shared health grant. Jackie, do you want to run through that actually?
Oh, sure. So the town entered into an agreement with the towns of Topsfield and Boxford for a shared public health excellence grant. The town of Topsfield has been the host, receiving the money from the Commonwealth and then paying the staff. This year we moved one employee from Topsfield to Middleton. Next year we're going to be moving the whole program to Middleton. All of these employees are paid fully through the grant, but this just corrects the portion that we need to pay that one employee this year, and we've provided Topsfield with an invoice so that they will be paying us in full for this entire amount, and that will fall back to free cash, $41,000.
Excellent. Any questions on that?
On the purpose, it says to reimburse the town by the town of Topsfield and the state.
So, yep, it's a state grant.
Where's Boxford? You said it's
So it's a shared grant in that the people who are employed by the money serve all three communities. Topsfield's currently the host. We're going to become the host. So Boxford has no financial transaction.
Yeah, guess what? Why is the host changing? Does it rotate, or is there a reason that we're becoming the host?
We are a little bit bigger and have more capacity. So we've been developing a program. Topsfield's done a wonderful job in getting us going. But we, with our wonderful health director, Tracy, have some more capacity in our office. We have some space that the others don't have. So we've jointly come together to have the discussion to move the program to Middleton. And we did talk about it, if you might recall, back in January. I believe it was January. But earlier this year, we talked about moving the program for July 1 to Middleton.
Okay.
But no cost impact to the town for us taking over hosting duties.
Okay.
All right, excellent. And I would just like to thank Jackie and Tracy Mellon for all their work on that. Article 4, the fiscal 24 collective bargaining appropriation. So the only outstanding collective bargaining agreement earlier this month was with the police union. I'm happy to report that we've come to an agreement with them. And so we need to pay them retro for fiscal 24. So this one article will cover the amount that they're owed prior to this date for the remainder of the fiscal year. And there is a note there that fiscal 25 and actually fiscal 26 of that contract will be funded in the omnibus budget, fiscal 25 for this year, fiscal 26 next. Are there any questions on that? All right. Article 5, compensation for elected officials. There's also a handout, so this is a usual customary article. It references Table A, so you should have received Table A today. Any questions on that? Agreeable group. The fiscal 25 omnibus budget, so that's been discussed at length and distributed. Are there any questions on that?
And that's the same numbers as it was in the prior one.
With the exception of
No, the numbers have, police is the only numbers that have changed. But all that happened is moving the amounts out of the compensation reserve and into the police union.
Okay.
So there's no change in the overall budget. It's just moving money between the accounts.
Article 7, the fiscal 25 budget operating overrides. There was a lot of back and forth and conversation over this piece throughout the budget process. We've broken it down as follows: under the Middleton School Department, $375,000, and under the town of Middleton, $658,500. Into different subcategories, totaling in at $1,033,500. In addition to that, there would be $763,000 in additional capacity built in for future outlying years. This would also require a ballot vote if approved at town meeting. Are there any questions or thoughts on that? Okay. Article 8, the fiscal 25 community preservation budget, debt service, projects, and expenses outlined below, totaling in at $3,554.35. Very specific amount. Any questions on that? Okay. Article 9, the fiscal 25 community preservation budget, new projects. So there are two items appearing here. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund transfer in the amount of $80,000 from community housing and $60,000 for Flint Public Library repairs under the historic preservation category for a total of $140,000. And I would note the Flint Public Library piece also includes a conditions assessment, just to look at future capital needs for the structures. Article 10, authorize fiscal 25 revolving fund spending limits for the Council on Aging, Recreation, and Stormwater Management. Article 11, fiscal 25 South Essex Sewerage District Enterprise Budget. That totals in at $111,696. Article 12, the fiscal 25 water enterprise budget, the total is at $311,518. Article 13 is accepting a sum from the Middleton Electric Light Department, otherwise known as MELD, in the amount of $258,212. We thank them for that contribution. Article 14, transfers to reserve accounts. So part of the conversation surrounding this is our overall free cash number. So what we're recommending is taking $600,000 right off the top of our total free cash figure. That would go towards the following funds in the following amounts: the OPEB trust fund at $100,000, the facility stabilization fund at $250,000, the stabilization fund at $50,000, the pension stabilization fund at $50,000, the capital stabilization fund at $100,000, and the special education stabilization fund at $50,000. Article 15, the fiscal 25 capital budget. The total capital plan for fiscal 25 comes in at $1,477,952. We're proposing that it be funded entirely through free cash. Are there any questions about any of the specific projects on there? Okay. Article 16, the Masconomet Regional Capital Request. So there are actually two requests for Masco. The first one in the amount of $500,000. Or excuse me, yeah, way off. I wish. $5 million even, so it would be a debt exclusion divided between the three communities. There was some conversation about why the exact number isn't there in terms of what our specific assessment is and the response that we received. As of yesterday, is that the towns are just voting to authorize the $5 million, but the exact apportionment is determined by pre-existing agreements. So we're still going to work with them to try to nail down an exact number at the time of town meeting, just so people know realistically what the direct impact would be to the people of Middleton. We're also waiting on some additional backup information for Masco in general on that project, but we do know it's the design phase for the roof and HVAC with a significantly larger anticipated construction cost to be determined in the future. Was it 20 million or 30 million?
In the capital project that was Masco administration presented to the school committee on the beginning of February of last year, it mentioned for these three items a total of 25 million. And it was stated that typically for those kinds of projects, 20% represents the OPM and designer fees. So that's where the 5 million comes from. I don't know that there anything more particular has been done since then. And the numbers that were presented a year ago, which were developed in '22, weren't time adjusted. So by the time any work is actually done, it will be, with continued escalations on construction costs, it will be higher than the total, will be higher than the 25 million, unless the impact is lessened by an SBA grant.
And I do want to make a note on Article 16, based on conversations with legal counsel today, I've been advised that that's a majority vote and not a 2/3 majority vote, because you're authorizing taking on the debt, but not actually taking on the debt directly. And we can have Jay write up a memo just explaining that component a little bit. Any other questions on that one? So the second item, Article 17, it originally started off as a $1 million request for various smaller size capital needs, but after conversation, Masco administration has agreed to step it in with $400,000 in fiscal '25 with the expectation of $600,000 in fiscal '26. So given the scale of the projects being done there, we felt borrowing wasn't really appropriate in that instance, and it should be funded through free cash. So the apportionment for Middleton is $135,586 in fiscal year '25.
So, that represents 33.9% of the 400,000, which is our capital, percentage, which is different than the operating percentage, because, it's figured different ways. So the impact of the 5 million, I don't think you will really know, because every year when the debt service is paid, it'll be, each town will pay based on then current percentage, but it will be around that 34%.
Excellent point. Any questions on Article 16 or 17? All right, Article 18, the Fuller Meadows School roof design debt. This one's a little bit different. The schools are planning on going through the MSBA program. As part of this, trying to kick off the design phase, it would be a $300,000 appropriation. I don't know if anybody from the schools would like to speak to it. Paul, have you?
Sure. We have applied to MSBA for a section of the roof. There was a small section of the roof at Fuller Meadow that was not eligible for replacement when we did the larger section, when we did the larger roof replacement years ago. This section is now of the vintage that it now is eligible for MSBA funding. And so we're going to see if we can get into that dance, so to speak. So we have submitted an application to MSBA. It does not guarantee that we get involved in the program, but we can't try to get it unless we submit all the paperwork. So we've submitted the paperwork. So that would be for down the road MSBA reimbursement, but we do need to do the design portion of it.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions about that? And that would require a 2/3 majority vote. Article 19, trust funds, investment income, local option adoption. So this is something that was brought forward as part of the fiscal '24 state budget, chapter 28 of the Acts of 2023, under the prudent investment rule. As worded by them, it would allow for a broader range of investments, some of which may be, quote, riskier than what would otherwise be allowed for investments in saving banks. And so there's two elements of that we wanted to highlight. The first is that it applies exclusively to trust funds, so we wouldn't be investing like stabilization funds or anything like that. The other component is such investing would be governed by the existing investment policy of the town, something that can be reviewed in upcoming years by the finance committee and or select board. And so there would be some guardrails in place on that.
What's the sum total of trust funds that this would apply to? Are we talking about $5 million?
Oh, no.
10 million, 2
No.
million, 500,000?
Nick, do you know the amount that we roughly have in the trust funds that this would pertain to? I can try to pull it up.
Yeah, I don't have probably 3 million, I wanna say. It's not that much.
Let me see if I can get that for you quickly, Costa. These are just the ones at Bartholomew, right?
Yep.
Just so I can go to the right place quickly.
I can go on to the next one while you're
Sure.
looking, so you're not being crushed by the silence while you're searching. Article 20, tax deferral limit increase. So this was brought forward by the Board of Assessors. It would, rather than have a set amount like 20,000 or 30,000 to be eligible for tax deferral, it would tie it to existing circuit breaker state income tax credit. Or the existing tax credit, so that by tying it to something that moves automatically set by a third party, you're not gonna have to go through every few years, 10 years, and update the threshold for that. Are there any questions on that piece?
On the purpose, you may want to eliminate that first sentence, because I think it just creates confusion.
Mm.
You know, it was increased from 20 to 30, but it's 30 now, and it's
Right.
going to something else, so.
I might just strike it all together.
Yeah.
And to circle back, the February balance of the trust funds was roughly $770,000.
And where's that money now?
It's held at Bartholomew and Company Investment Trust, along with our stabilization funds, our bond proceeds.
So would it be allowed to stay there without this vote, or would it have to be moved if this vote?
No, it can stay in there, it's just
So basically, this whole, this is really more of a housekeeping item. All of our funds fall under the prudent investment rule. It's state law. It's so that we can only invest in the legal list. Trust funds until this point have been excluded, so they're really just sitting in money markets for the most part. This just allows us to put this in with the rest of our funds. The riskier piece is really just, you're getting more than a money market. So that's really all this does.
All right, Article 21, the statute acceptance for treasurer collector education stipend. So back in 2000, the town originally intended to take this up under Article 18. There was a mistake in listing out what particular section of Mass General Law it applied to, and so inadvertently it wasn't enacted, but to date we have been doing this as practice. So a special thanks to our eagle-eyed town clerk who came across this one. Any questions? Okay. Article 22, an easement for the intersection of South Main Street and Boston Street, which is Route 114 and Route 62. So as part of the ongoing 40B development with Billbridge, Middleton, in that area, part of the negotiation with the select board has been that the developer would need to donate a portion of land on both sides of the frontage of that corner to accommodate an additional turning lane. They have agreed to that component, but we need to accept the easement at a town meeting. Any questions?
I just want to point out that the zoning board's decision will, include the requirement that the developer grant the easement, but, if we do not accept it, his approval doesn't go away. So, it just he gets the approval without giving up land.
Yeah, good point, Klaus.
Thank you. Any questions on that? All right, and then lastly, Article 23 is MBTA zoning, which we've talked about as a community for some time now. There is a supplemental that's currently being reviewed by legal counsel. It's the final draft from Innes Associates highlighting that process. The language for Article 23 that's in the warrant today was provided by legal counsel as well. I will note it requires a majority vote, not a 2/3 majority vote.
This just requires a majority?
Yep, confirmed it today.
The zoning articles require 2.
2/3, yep.
So why would this only require a majority?
I'm gonna have Jay draft a memo,
Okay.
further highlighting it.
It is probably in the state.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah, they tend to do themselves favors, so. Would anybody care to dig in deeper on what the proposal is? We might as well over here. So, so you're required to set aside a certain area as, an overlay area for MBTA zoning that would allow for somewhat denser zoning if you're an MBTA community or MBTA adjacent community. What we're proposing is selecting an area of town up by the Furtencroft Towers that would qualify, under what is written in Mass General Law. However, it's an area that realistically wouldn't be developed because of the existence of the tower there. And so we've, I think collectively found a way with the help of the planning board to, you know, in so many words, find a way to pinch our nose basically and comply in a way that's not gonna really have any type of significant, negative impact on Middleton, if any impact at all.
As far as we know, you never know what piece of land somebody can pop up with over there.
Yeah, the currently would be included is the housing authorities, you know, Memorial Drive development, Ferncroft Tower, Ironwood, the 2 mid-rise buildings, a couple of smaller condo complexes, the hotel, and the office building. So currently, there is no undeveloped land in that, you know, proposed district.
Is it the exact boundaries of those properties, or is there a little?
There is, you know, from what the draft I saw, identified map and lot numbers.
Okay.
So the lots
Okay.
encompass, you know, those things, you know, trying to develop into a more intensive use condominium land is virtually impossible because you need a supermajority of the condo owners and the first mortgage holders. The housing authority land, you know, there's more control over by the community. So that leaves the hotel and the office buildings as parcels that something may happen to in the future. But the office building, as far as I know, is doing very well as an office building. The hotel may be more of an issue.
I would also add is, part of other conversations, we fielded a lot of conversations on this recently. And the question arose that if the people of Middleton go ahead and vote to enact this piece of legislation, if it's struck down at a later date, as many people are aware, several other communities have opted to not adopt this and enter into a lawsuit with Commonwealth, which is a difficult proposition. But if the law is struck down in the future, an affirmative vote from Middleton would be considered effectively null and void. So you wouldn't have to go back and remove it or anything like that. It just couldn't be upheld because you're enacting a law that doesn't exist anymore, basically. So that answers one of those questions. The other component that kind of makes this a little stickier is the grant funding component. And there are certainly people based on feedback at the planning board meeting in particular that said they can keep their grant money. And I understand their position and their passion in that area, but in realistic terms, these aren't just maybe type of future monies. These are some things that our team has actively been working towards for some time. So items like the MVP grant, which caps it at about $300,000, or MassWorks, which caps at $2.5 million. Housing Works caps at $5 million. Those are all items that we've been exploring, particularly to address ongoing infrastructure needs and traffic issues throughout Middleton, down the 114 corridor. So there would be a significant impact in losing those monies.
So, and it ties into the previous article, the easement, getting, the easement is great, but that doesn't change the intersection without the spending of a lot of money. And a MassWorks or Housing Works grant would allow the town to actually widen the intersection instead of just having an easement for future use. So if we don't approve it and the state follows through on its threat of not giving grant funding, then addressing that intersection will be many years down the line until we can convince DOT to allocate the money for its widening.
Any questions about that article? All right, so that would conclude annual town meeting. Just some other notes on the warrant. We did receive earlier this week the language for the ballot language for the override, and we additionally received, as of this afternoon, the Masco language for the $5 million for the roof design project. That I'm not going to read in its entirety, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Any other questions in general?
With the $5 million at Masco, if what happens, if it's approved and the work, the owner's project manager and the design work is less than $5 million, what happens to the remainder?
So it's my understanding that that's an up to $5 million, and so they would only take what they need. And so I suppose while we have this group together, there have been conversations about ways to get messaging out, I suppose, for the override and other elements of this document. Does anybody, either on the select board or finance committee, have any thoughts or wishes on that topic?
I'm getting the word out. I don't know, I think that people that want to fund the supplemental budget are going to have to start pushing to get the word out.
So something we've kicked around is visits to the Council on Aging or different neighborhood associations and things like that. Does that seem adequate?
One of the things though in 16, when we last had to do this, the fire chief at the time, I know, spent some time going to the various condo associations and giving them presentations as to why it needed to be done, what's the potential benefit for the people that live, in that condo, faster, response times, et cetera. I think, a similar kind of approach, and we can't forget the condo associations, right? You're making these presentations. There are almost 1,000 condo units. They're about 30% of our households. So we have to do what we can to educate not only them, but everyone as to the need for the override. And the fact is that, everyone, no matter what you think is the most important part of town government, every part of town government is impacted, by this. There's additional money for education, there's additional money for public safety, for the DPW, for, maintaining our facilities that we're, investing $60+ million in, and for utilizing those facilities. We've never had, a community center before. It will take, people to operate that and to provide the programming, not only to the seniors, but to others that will make use of that facility. It is being built for people to use it. It's the library all over again. Build it and they will come for programming, and that's what's happened. They will come for programming to the senior center as well as to the community center. So every part of our community will benefit or be disadvantaged by, the override not passing. I know it's not something that any of us on the FinCom or the Select Board does lightly, but we've allocated as best we could, on the omnibus within the restraints of 2.5 and our financial management policies. And it's, I think, our unanimous conclusion that what we can provide within those restraints is not enough to meet the expectations and the needs of the people. We can't fund 2 more police officers, 3 more firefighters within the omnibus budget. The only way to get there is through an override. We can't add to the DPW or to the elementary schools. So I think, everyone in this room or who cares about the community should educate themselves on the financial impact of doing it or not doing it. It's not an easy decision. We've asked people to dig into their pockets, several times. But to get what you want, you'll have to come up, dig again, and hopefully people are willing to do. They may see the need and not feel that they can pay the extra, but hopefully enough people will see the wisdom of doing this and invest in our town services.
I'm sure the school committee and the PTOs will do their job getting the word out, because it's a big chunk of the schools.
Yeah, I haven't been through this process before, so, I'm willing to take any advice on how to get the word out.
And I think the key part, we have to excuse ourselves for the Washington School Committee, but I think the key part of that sentence, obviously, was the very first thing you said, since 2016. There's a lot of communities that can say it's been 8 years since an override, and I think that's a key part of it, for sure.
And, in 16, we did the same thing what we're doing now. This is how much for the next year and the extra capacity. And we told the voters that extra capacity was so that we wouldn't have to go back and ask for an override for 5 years. We managed to do it for 8 years. So again, we're saying, 5 years down the line, we can do it. And I think, given our past history, I think there's some reason to, for people to believe that we will manage to find a way to get at least the 5 years out of this.
All right, so I think probably Chiefs early next week if you want to get together, and Loretta. Then we'll try to figure out some type of schedule. We'll go pay some people a visit. All right. Beyond that, the pre-town meeting I think we had slated for the Thursday prior to town meeting, the week before. I was kicking around potentially doing that on the Tuesday prior instead. Are there any conflicts people foresee, just to give us more time to respond?
We have things that we continued on the select board agenda to the 7th, so we just need to circle on those.
So maybe we can, if it's, we can take a look, maybe it's not a deep agenda, do it at 7 instead. So just to put it on your radar, kicking around, thick and moving that. So any other questions, thoughts?
From when to when?
From the Thursday prior to the Tuesday prior. So the exact date is?
The 7th instead of the 9th.
Perfect. just to give us a little more turnaround time.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you'd like to cover?
No, I think
Well said.
everybody all set.
We had in our calendars a tentative meeting, board meeting on the 4th, that's probably not needed anymore.
Next Thursday.
No, unless anybody has anything they wanna. I think we're good.
Are you guys gonna finish your recommendations tonight or at a future meeting?
We're not posted for doing it tonight, so we're gonna have to do it at a future meeting. I think, you can't make the 4th. We'll talk about it after this meeting.
Okay, we all set? Motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.